Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots.
Every state in the U.S. has some sort of mail-in voting for federal elections. Some politicians and leaders, including President Trump, have shared concerns and claims that mail-in ballots lead to voter fraud. But advocates say they're essential to ensure every voice is heard.
Without mail-in ballots, it is the most vulnerable folks in our community who aren't able to drive to the polling location that still have a constitutional right to vote and should have voting accessible to them just as any other voter who has different privileges and is able to cast a ballot in person.
According to the Census Bureau, in the 2024 election, Americans cast more than 154 million ballots. 29% of those came through the mail. More than 36% of voters 65 and older used mail-in ballots that year. Nearly half of Asian voters cast ballots by mail, followed by Hispanic and white voters. People with bachelor's degrees or higher were more likely to vote by mail, as were families in the highest income bracket tracked.
In general, mail ballots are important to protecting people's constitutional right to vote and to equitably access that right.
That includes people living with disabilities, who historically have slightly lower voter turnouts than those without. In 2024, of the nearly 33 million voting-age citizens living with disabilities, 61% said they voted in the general election, though the census didn't report whether that was in person or by mail. Looking at previous elections, however, we know that those living with disabilities are far more likely to vote by mail than those without, according to analysis by the Election Assistance Commission and Rutgers University. For voters living with disabilities who voted in person, 1 in 5 reported having difficulty doing so. There are many reasons someone may choose to vote by mail, from disabilities to convenience to even living abroad. That's protected under the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act. It applies to members of the military, their families, and U.S. citizens living abroad. Speaking of laws, there are quite a few that cover mail-in ballots and states' rights to run federal elections as they see fit. That's actually in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, aka the Elections Clause. This is why the rules for how you can vote differ from state to state. State officials decide who can vote via mail or absentee. They set deadlines and what, if anything, voters need to submit before heading to the mailbox. But one thing they all have in common is systems to prevent voter fraud.
And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt, massive fraud all over the place.
So let's talk about fraud. We're going to compare two sets of data: the Heritage Foundation's election fraud map and the American Presidency Project's documentation of the number of ballots cast in presidential elections. The Heritage Foundation used media coverage to identify 1,600 cases of voter fraud and misconduct since 1982, most resulting in criminal convictions. According to the American Presidency Project's numbers, voters have cast more than 1.3 billion ballots in all presidential elections since 1984. Okay, so the Heritage Foundation goes back to 82 and includes midterms, while the Presidency Project goes back to 84 and is only the generals. Yes, that is not an exact comparison. But if we take the 1,600 documented cases of voter fraud and misconduct and compare that to the 1.3 billion votes we know have been cast, and it would be much more with midterms, that's a tiny fraction of a percent of ballots cast that may have been fraudulent. For more unbiased straight facts on issues impacting voters in elections, like the contentious redistricting debates, download the SAN app to stay informed.